Today begins the first videos in the series of building up my 2022 Honda Grom. What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things, and welcome to my brand new garage. Now, I apologize in advance for the echo in here. I really just moved in and it's kind of echoey. I don't have a lot of my typical tools and things to work on everything that I have behind me to work on. So I figured we would kick off today's series by doing sort of a motorcycle strip down video. This is everything that I do to most of my new motorcycles as soon as I get them. And a lot of it doesn't really include a lot of tools. So behind me, I have this pack, this little tool roll right here. This is actually coming from Step 22. It is called their Pangolin tool roll. I've been traveling around with this thing in my van for the past couple of months, and I have about a 200-piece mechanic set in here. That way, if I'm out on a trail in my van, I can fix it up with this toolkit right here. Or I can fix up most things, I should say. I should have enough tools in here to start stripping this thing down and getting it looking a little less stock. You'll also notice behind me here we have the 2022 Honda Ruckus, which I will be building out sometime in the future. I also have my Polaris Razor Turbo S back there, which you guys will see in this big sort of build series of all of these different fun things that help you get out there and help you adventure just a little bit further. So without further ado, I don't really have any checklist or anything. I'm just going to start ripping stuff off of this Honda Grom, and I'll sort of show the process and explain my thoughts behind doing everything that I'm about to do. So first things first, what I like to do is get rid of all of the ugly badging, if there is any. This Grom logo I'm gonna leave on there, but you have a lot of warning stickers like this on the gas tank right here, which should peel off pretty easily. However, if you let these things sit on your tank for a while, you'll sort of get a ring around the outside. So basically, I'm gonna go around the entire bike and just sort of clean up all of these little labels that you may find coming straight from a dealership, and then also remove some of the things like the reflectors, which you can simply do by hand. No tools required. These little reflectors have nuts on the back, so a pair of pliers can help. And I'm actually gonna come back to this side right here and remove the brackets that were holding those reflectors on. If you leave those things on there, you can snag them on branches and all sorts of stuff if you're taking your bike off-road. Now over here on the left side of the bike, you have stuff like your tire information on this entire rear fender chain guard. This stuff is important to know, so if you're not familiar with your bike, I'd recommend at least taking a picture of this before you rip it off. And again, this stuff isn't necessary, but it does make the bike look just a little bit cleaner. Let's see if we can get this off the swing arm without leaving a bunch of residue. Not bad, but also not great. I'm gonna have to come back in here later with Goo Gone and remove the rest of this goo. Now, if removing all of the safety labels and reflectors wasn't enough to piss off all of the safety hardos out there, I'm also going to be removing the mirrors. I was actually just riding off-road a little bit, and this one right here came loose already. These mirrors are effective, and it is important to be able to see when you're riding. However, these things are super ugly. Doing something as simple as removing these mirrors cleans up the look of the bike a lot. Now, I'm also gonna come back in here with a 14mm socket and remove these little mounts that the stock mirrors mount into. Don't need them on there. Again, saves a tiny bit of weight, but I'm really just doing all of this to clean up the look of the bike. And there you go. Now, in reality, the first thing that I would do is rip off this undertail here, but because I don't have all of the parts to go on here yet, I'm going to be leaving this stock for now. You do want to make sure that you have a license plate light because you can get pulled over for that. And I would rip off all these reflectors and everything, but I'm going to be changing out the entire tail of this bike here as soon as my order ships. I'm going to be doing an integrated taillight with the turns in the tail, LED of course. I'm going to be installing some LED ones up front for the turns as well. And this entire ugly, gross looking plastic assembly here will be completely removed in the future. I wish I could do that right now because that is really what changes the look of this bike. But instead, I do have some other parts that we can install right now. Now, since I'm only working with the parts that I have access to right now, I do have a few parts here that we're going to use to clean up the entire front end of this bike. Now, the stock handlebars on the Grom are great for a first-time rider. However, I in the past have put these Protaper Honda mini bars on my old Grom, and it really changes the feel of the bike. It looks way better. And I also have some accessories to mount onto these bars. We have some new grips, of course, coming from Renthal. I have a Chimera, however you want to call it. I have their quick twist throttle tube, so it'll make the throttle response just a little bit better, since we're going pretty much full throttle everywhere we go on this bike. And I'm not riding mirrorless. By law, you do have to have a mirror depending on which state you are in. And ever since I was 16, I always went with these right here, which are some just cheap Amazon bar end mirrors. I actually ended up putting one of these on my Ruckus, which you can see right here behind me. It's great, they're super cheap and they're very easy to install at the same time. That was until I started building up my Ninja and I decided to splurge a little bit on a mirror. I got one right here from CRG, Constructors Racing Group. These mirrors are amazing. I only need one of them and I typically run my mirror on my left bar end. I don't like putting anything over here because this is of course where you're going to be twisting the throttle. Now this is very comparable to the ones that you can find on Amazon. However, the build quality is so much better, so I decided to give the Grom some nice parts this time, and we're going to be installing this as well. Now the first thing I'm going to do is remove the controls from each side, starting over here. I believe all I'll really need is a Phillips head screwdriver for this. Don't think anything has changed control-wise from the previous years. Make sure you drop your screws all over the ground. Make sure you get them nice and lost in the process. And since I'm changing out this throttle tube, I am going to pop these little wires off. Gonna be a little bit careful here because I am going to be using these again in the future, of course. Now if I remove this bar end, I can simply slide this old tube right off. And that thing is on there. All right, this bar end is being super finicky right now, so I'm not actually gonna be reusing these grips or this throttle tube, so I'm just gonna take all of that stuff off together. Next, we'll move over to this side, do the same thing. So now I'm removing my headlight, switch, the horn, and then you can pull that off and just let that hang there for now. Next up, we got 8mm holding on the levers. That's the clutch. And the front brake. Now while I'm up here, I'm also going to remove these little zip ties here, and you can reuse these if you want to. Now the bars are here by their lonesome. We're gonna pop off these little covers and use, I believe, an Allen to pop these out of here and replace the bars. Going with a 6mm on here, and these are probably gonna be pretty hard to get off. We're gonna be reusing these clamps and bolts, so it's a good idea to not strip these. Now that the bars are off, you'll notice on the underside here that there is a little hole, and on one of the controls, there's actually a plastic pin that goes in there, and it keeps the controls from actually rotating around. Now drilling a hole in a round bar like this is a little bit difficult, and the Protaper Minis do not have that hole. So what you can try to do is make a little dimple impression on there and then drill a hole of your own, or you could simply wrap the new bars with electrical tape and then that pin will kind of stick there on the bars. I don't have any tape with me, but I do have a drill bit, so I'm probably going to try to drill this. We're gonna find out how that goes. Now to mark the position of this hole, I actually am going to put the handlebars on here just a little bit. And I'm just gonna put these bolts in by hand. Now I don't have electrical tape, but I do have duct tape. So I'm gonna sit on the bike and get the bars to about where I want them. And I guess it is important to note that with this cross section right here, it does make getting to the key a little bit more difficult. So you wanna make sure you can actually stick your key in the ignition and pull it out without it hitting this bar. Now that I've got that in place where I want it, I'm going to take a little strip of duct tape. I'm going to wrap it around the rear of the bar, about where this is going to fall. About this area right here. I'm actually gonna put this grip on the left side right now, that way I make sure I get the placement correct. That's pretty snug. Now that that grip is about where I want it, I'm going to replace these controls. I'm not gonna worry about the clutch right now. I'll just make sure that it has enough room there, which it has plenty. I'll position this to where I want my switches, say right about there. I'm gonna squeeze the controls, maybe wiggle it just a little bit, which will hopefully leave me a little impression on the underside of the bars there. I see that the impression is in there, so I can go ahead and remove the bars again. And then we'll get into the fun part. I don't know if this is going to work, to be honest with you, but I should have a little mark now where I know where to drill that hole. So you can see right here on the duct tape where that little pin in the controls actually marked the bars. So moment of truth, again, this is gonna be kind of difficult, but I'm just gonna hold down the bars, use a tiny little drill bit here to try to make a little pilot hole. Surprisingly worked. Now I'll step up to the drill bit. That is the same size as the previous hole. This is a 3/16. Might have to do this gradually if this does not work, but we'll see. Damn, professional. Now that I've got the new hole drilled exactly where I want it in the new bars, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall these and position them exactly how I had them before. It's also a good idea to stand the bike upright and really get a good feel of where these bars are going to be positioned, because once you lock them in, you don't want to move them. Now, a moment of truth to see if this hole will line up with this little peg on here. Slip the turn signal through. That is now locked in. It's not rotating at all, and that's exactly what we're looking for when we drill that hole in there. I'm gonna reinstall these screws. Now that those are tight, give it a little bit of a push. That thing is not going anywhere. This is the proper way to do it, by drilling the hole in there, because if you don't, then chances are you could have a little bit of a gap around here and you could get water in there. Not something that you want, so if you have drill bits, I'd recommend using this method and getting that thing installed on there correctly. Next, I will install the levers again, and then we'll move on to throttle side. Next up, throttle side. Again, we're installing this Chimera quick twist throttle tube. Is gonna add like 10 horsepower to the Grom. I'm gonna first squeeze my grip over here. This is much easier to do if you have the right tools, lubricants and all that good stuff. Now that I've got this fitting the way that I want to, I'm going to slide it over, reconnect some of the cables. This part can be a little bit tricky. This is always the most tedious part, getting those little tiny cylinders to lock in. A few twists, and everything's lined up. Now I'm gonna line this up with the end of the bar, just about there. I probably will try to remove the bar ends from the old bars and install them here instead of using these plastic caps. Go ahead and reinstall the front brake. Now, I want to make sure that my levers are even. You don't want the front brake to be up in the air and the clutch to be down on the ground. So that feels pretty good there. Now I can reinstall the starter, kill switch. Make sure not to pinch these wires. Now you may notice here that there's a little bit of a gap, which means I have something pinched. I'm going to back this screw out and make sure it all closes up nicely, just like the other side. Now that locks into place. There we go. Tight seal. Everything is sealed up, so we're not going to get water in there. Throttle turns freely. Now it's time to clean everything up, install a mirror. We should be good to go. Alright guys, there you have it, the first step of the strip down and build of the 2022 Honda Grom. The Sat Grom is what we're gonna be calling it here on the channel. The very next video may be a color change, a wrap, possible paint job. I got tires to go on this thing and an exhaust whenever I can find one that I actually like. Other than that though, today we did the Protaper Honda mini bars, 7/8. I did Renthal grips, the mirror, and I even mounted a little ram mount right here in the center. That way I can hold my phone, get GPS. Got full extension of the bars left and right. Throttle looks good. All that's left to do is ride it. So if you guys have any questions on this, let me know in the comments down below. I'll be sure to respond to you guys as quickly as I can. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you leave a thumbs up and comment below what else you want to see me do with the Grom. So that's going to be all for today. If you are new to the channel, consider clicking subscribe. I make new videos every single week. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.